The dust had barely settled on Thomas Walsh's grave when the whispers started, and by the time Tabitha Walsh walked through the center of Ellsworth, Kansas, 3 weeks after burying her husband, the entire town had already convicted her of sins she had never committed. She held her head high despite the burning in her chest, despite the way Martha Henderson deliberately turned her back when Tabitha passed the general store, despite the way Reverend Patterson's wife clutched her Bible tighter and moved her children to the opposite side of the street. The July heat of 1875 beat down mercilessly on the prairie town, but the coldness in the eyes of her neighbors cut deeper than any Kansas winter ever could. Tabitha's boots clicked against the wooden planks as she made her way toward the post office, her black morning dress already collecting dust from the street. She was only 24 years old, but she felt ancient under the weight of their judgment. Thomas had been 42 when he died, a detail the town had never quite forgiven her for. They had married 2 years ago when she had nowhere else to go, no family left after the fever took her parents. He had been kind enough, though distant, and she had tried to be a good wife. Now they said she had poisoned him. They said she had married him for his modest savings. They said she had taken lovers while he lay dying. None of it was true, but truth mattered little when measured against the currency of gossip. "Murderer," someone hissed as she passed. The word carried on the hot wind. Tabitha's hands trembled, but she kept walking. The post office was just ahead. She only needed to collect any letters that might have arrived. Then she could return to the small house on the edge of town, the one Thomas had built with his own hands, the one that now felt like a prison of memories and accusations. The post office door swung open just as she reached for it, and she nearly collided with Quinton Zeller. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered and weathered by years of working his ranch in the unforgiving prairie sun. At 31, he had built one of the most successful cattle operations in Ellis County through sheer determination and honest labor. His dark hair curled slightly at his collar, and his eyes, a striking shade of gray-blue, held an intelligence and kindness that seemed at odds with his rough-hewn appearance. "Mrs. Walsh," he said, tipping his hat, his voice a low rumble that somehow managed to sound respectful without the false sympathy that others offered. "Forgive me, I was not watching where I was going." "Mr. Zeller," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She moved to step around him, expecting him to make his excuses and leave like everyone else did now. Instead, he held the door open wider. "After you, madam." The simple courtesy nearly undid her. She blinked rapidly, willing away the tears that threatened to fall, and stepped inside the cramped office. The postmaster, Henry Griggs, looked up from his sorting with an expression that could only be described as unwelcoming. "I am here to collect my mail," Tabitha said, proud that her voice did not shake. Henry glanced at Quinton, who had followed her inside, then back at Tabitha. "Nothing for you today, Mrs. Walsh. Are you certain? I am expecting correspondence from my late husband's cousin in St. Louis." "I said there is nothing." Henry's tone left no room for argument, though Tabitha could see several letters stacked on the counter behind him. "Perhaps you could check again," Quinton said, his voice still mild but carrying an edge that made Henry straighten. "Seeing as how you have not actually looked, Mr. Zeller, this does not concern you. I am making it my concern." Quinton stepped closer to the counter, and despite his calm demeanor, there was something in his bearing that suggested he was not a man to be trifled with. "Check again, Henry." The postmaster's jaw clenched, but he turned to the stack of letters. After a moment of shuffling through them with obvious reluctance, he produced a single envelope and slapped it on the counter. "Must have missed it." Tabitha took the letter quickly, noting the return address was indeed from St. Louis? Thank you, she said, though the words tasted bitter. She turned to leave, desperately wanting to escape the suffocating atmosphere of judgment and hostility. Outside, the harsh sunlight made her squint. She had barely descended the 2 steps to the street when a woman's voice rang out, shrill and accusatory. Shameless. Absolutely shameless. Tabitha froze. Eleanor Pritchard, the mayor's wife, stood in front of the general store with 3 other women, all of them pillars of Ellsworth society, all of them looking at Tabitha with expressions ranging from disgust to righteous anger. It has barely been a month since you buried poor Thomas, and already you are throwing yourself at the nearest man with money, Eleanor continued, her voice carrying down the street. Several townspeople stopped to watch, attracted by the spectacle like moths to flame. I did no such thing, Tabitha said, her face burning with humiliation. I merely collected my mail. We all saw you in there with Mr. Zeller, batting your eyes, playing the helpless widow. You trapped one man with your wiles, and now you are setting your cap for another. Eleanor's face had gone red with the fervor of her accusations. You killed Thomas Walsh as sure as if you had shot him, working him to death, draining his life force with your demands. And now you parade around town without shame, without decency. The words hit Tabitha like physical blows. She opened her mouth to defend herself, but what could she say? These women had already made up their minds. The entire town had convicted her in their hearts, and there was no evidence, no testimony that would change their verdict. Mrs. Pritchard. Quinton's voice cut through the heavy air like a blade. He had followed Tabitha out of the post office and now stood beside her, his presence solid and reassuring in a way that made her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. Mr. Zeller, surely you see what she is, Eleanor said, though her voice had lost some of its strident confidence. We are only trying to protect you from the same fate that befell poor Thomas. What I see, Quinton said, his voice carrying clearly to every person on the street, is a grieving widow being persecuted by people who should know better. What I see is Christian ladies forgetting every lesson about judgment and mercy they have supposedly learned in that church you attend so faithfully. Eleanor's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. How dare you? We know what we know. And what exactly do you know? Quinton took a step forward, and despite his lack of aggression, there was something commanding about him that made even Eleanor take a step back. Do you know that Thomas Walsh had a weak heart? That Doc Brennan warned him 3 years ago to take it easy, but he would not listen. Do you know that Tabitha Walsh spent every night for 2 weeks nursing him, barely sleeping, barely eating, trying everything to save him? The doctor never said anything about a weak heart, one of the other women protested, because Thomas swore him to secrecy. He was a proud man who did not want people to think he was weak. Quinton's eyes swept across the gathered crowd. Doc told me in confidence after Thomas passed, concerned that Mrs. Walsh might blame herself. But I see that information might have been better shared with this town, seeing as how you have all decided to make her a scapegoat for simple tragedy. We have heard things, Eleanor said, but her voice had lost its certainty. People talk about how quickly they married, about the age difference. Tabitha Walsh married a man who offered her safety when she had nothing and no one. She worked hard, kept his house, tended his garden, and showed him kindness and respect. She held his hand as he died and wept over his grave. Quinton's voice roughened slightly. And you have repaid her grief with cruelty and slander. You should all be ashamed. The silence that followed was absolute. Tabitha could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, could feel the heat of tears threatening to spill over. No one had defended her in so long, perhaps ever, and the fact that this man, this rancher she barely knew, would stand up to the entire town on her behalf was overwhelming. Come, Mrs. Walsh, Quinton said, his voice gentling as he turned to her. Let me drive you home. You should not have to walk in this heat. I could not impose, she whispered, acutely aware of every eye on them. It is no imposition. My wagon is right here. He gestured to a sturdy wagon hitched to two strong horses just down the street. Without waiting for further protest, he offered her his arm. Tabitha hesitated for only a moment before accepting. His arm was solid beneath her hand, warm even through the fabric of his shirt. He led her to the wagon with the quiet confidence of a man who cared nothing for the opinions of gossips, and helped her up onto the seat with a gentleness that made her chest ache. As they pulled away from the center of town, Tabitha finally allowed herself to breathe. The tears came then, silent and hot, streaming down her face despite her best efforts to contain them. Quinton said nothing, simply drove the wagon steadily toward the small house at the edge of town. When they arrived, he helped her down and walked her to the door. Thank you, she managed to say, her voice thick with emotion. You did not have to do that. Yes, I did, he said simply. What they are doing to you is wrong. But now they will talk about you too. They will say you have fallen under my supposed spell or worse. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Let them talk. I have weathered worse than gossip, Mrs. Walsh. He tipped his hat to her. If you need anything, my ranch is just 3 miles west of town. The Triple Z, anyone can give you directions. He was turning to leave when she found herself speaking again. Why did you do it? You do not know me. For all you know, they could be right. Quinton turned back, his gray-blue eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. I was in the general store the day after Thomas died. I saw you buying black fabric for your morning dress, and Mrs. Henderson refused to serve you. Said she would not aid a murderess. You did not yell or make a scene. You simply set the money on the counter and told her the fabric you needed. You said please and thank you even as she cursed at you. He paused. No guilty person carries themselves with that kind of dignity, and no innocent person should suffer the way this town has made you suffer. Before Tabitha could respond, he tipped his hat once more and climbed back onto his wagon. She watched him drive away, her heart a confused tangle of gratitude, shame, and something else she could not quite name. The next day, Tabitha woke to find a crate on her doorstep. Inside were fresh eggs, a slab of bacon, flour, sugar, coffee, and a variety of other staples. There was no note, but she knew who had left them. The kindness of it brought fresh tears to her eyes. She spent the morning working in her small garden, trying to focus on the familiar task of pulling weeds and watering the vegetables. The work was soothing, allowing her mind to quiet for brief stretches. But her peace was shattered when she heard the sound of horses approaching. 3 men rode up to her fence. She recognized them immediately as ranch hands from the Pritchard spread. The mayor owned the second-largest ranch in the area, and these men had the cocky assurance of those who worked for powerful people. Mrs. Walsh, the leader, a man named Jack Sawyer, called out. He did not dismount, and his tone was anything but respectful. We have been asked to deliver a message. Tabitha straightened, wiping her hands on her apron. What message? The decent people of Ellsworth think it would be best if you moved on. There are other towns, other places where your kind might be more welcome. Jack's smile was cruel. We would be happy to help you pack, my kind. Tabitha's voice was steady despite the fear beginning to coil in her stomach. And what kind is that? The kind that brings shame and trouble. You have bewitched Mr. Zeller, just like you bewitched Thomas Walsh. We cannot let you destroy another good man. I have done nothing to Mr. Zeller or anyone else. This is my home, and I have every right to stay. Rights? One of the other men laughed. A woman like you has no rights. Best pack up before things get difficult for you. They rode off before she could respond. their laughter carrying on the wind. Tabitha stood trembling in her garden, the joy of the morning completely evaporated. The message was clear. The town wanted her gone, and they were willing to threaten and intimidate to make it happen. She went inside and locked the door, her mind racing. She had nowhere to go, no money for travel even if she wanted to leave. Thomas's small savings had gone to pay for his burial and the debts he had left behind. She was trapped, caught between staying in a town that hated her and leaving for an uncertain future with nothing to sustain her. That evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and red across the prairie sky, Tabitha sat at her small kitchen table and tried to think of solutions. She could write to Thomas's cousin in St. Louis, but the letter she had received yesterday made it clear that he wanted nothing to do with her. He too had heard the rumors and had written to tell her not to expect any assistance from Thomas's family. A knock at the door made her jump. For a moment, she considered not answering, afraid it might be more men with more threats. But then a familiar voice called out, "Mrs. Walsh, it is Quinton Zeller. I saw the Pritchard hands leaving your property this afternoon and wanted to make sure you were all right." Tabitha hurried to the door and opened it, relief washing over her at the sight of him. He stood on her small porch, hat in hand, his expression concerned. "How did you know they were here?" she asked. "I was bringing over some supplies and saw them from the road. I held back, not wanting to make things worse, but I have been worried." His eyes searched her face. "Did they hurt you?" "No, they just delivered a message. The town wants me to leave." She heard the exhaustion in her own voice. "They think I have bewitched you now, that I am some kind of dangerous temptress leading good men to ruin." Quinton's jaw tightened. "May I come in? There is something I want to discuss with you, and I would rather do it properly." Tabitha hesitated. Allowing a man into her home, especially now, would only add fuel to the fire of gossip. But she was so tired of making every decision based on what others might think, and Quinton had shown her nothing but kindness. "Of course," she said, stepping aside. Her home was simple but clean, the furniture modest but well-maintained. She had done her best to make it comfortable despite the limited resources. Quinton sat at the kitchen table when she gestured to a chair, and she sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap. "I have a proposal," he said without preamble, "and I want you to hear me out completely before you respond." Tabitha nodded, her heart beginning to race with a mixture of hope and apprehension. "Marry me," he said. The words hung in the air between them, shocking in their directness. "I know it sounds insane. We barely know each other. But hear me out. If you marry me, you will have protection. No one will dare threaten you if you are my wife. You will have security, a home at the ranch, safety. And I promise you, I expect nothing inappropriate in return. We can have separate rooms. This would be a marriage of convenience, a business arrangement if you prefer to think of it that way." "Why?" The word escaped her lips before she could think better of it. "Why would you do this for me?" "You would be tying yourself to a woman the whole town despises, ruining your own reputation. My reputation can withstand it. And as for why," he leaned forward slightly, his expression earnest, "because what they are doing to you is wrong and I have the means to stop it. Because I have seen you face cruelty with grace, and that tells me more about your character than any gossip ever could. And because—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Because I am tired of being alone on that ranch. I am tired of eating meals by myself and talking only to my horses. I think we could be friends at the very least, and friendship is a better foundation for marriage than most people start with." "You could have any woman in the county," Tabitha said. "You do not need to marry a widow with a ruined name. I do not want any woman in the county. The respectable ladies bore me with their simpering and their obsession with social status. You are different. You are real." He met her eyes steadily. "I am not asking you to love me, Mrs. Walsh. I am offering you a partnership, a way out of an impossible situation. Think about it, please." Tabitha's mind whirled. It was crazy, impulsive, exactly the kind of thing that would confirm every awful thing the town was saying about her. But it was also a lifeline, a chance at safety and security she desperately needed. "When would this marriage take place?" she asked. "As soon as possible. Tomorrow, if you are willing. We could ride to the next county where people do not know the gossip. Get married properly, legally, and return as husband and wife. They will say I have seduced you, trapped you. Let them say what they want. I am making this choice with clear eyes and sound mind, and I will tell anyone who asks exactly that." He reached across the table, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of his hand. "You do not have to decide right now. Sleep on it. But know that my offer is genuine and it will stand for as long as you need it." After he left, Tabitha lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling of her small bedroom. Every logical part of her mind screamed that this was too fast, too desperate, too likely to end in disaster. But another part of her, the part that was so tired of being afraid and alone, wanted to say yes more than anything. By the time dawn light crept through her window, she had made her decision. When Quinton arrived the next morning, she was waiting on her porch, wearing her best dress, the one that was not black. It was a simple blue cotton, faded from washing but clean and pressed. "I will marry you," she said before he could even dismount. "But I have conditions." He climbed down from his horse, his expression carefully neutral. "I am listening. If this is truly a marriage of convenience, then I need to know I can leave if I want to. If either of us becomes unhappy with the arrangement, we find a way to dissolve it without bitterness." "Agreed." "And I will not be a kept woman, sitting idle. I want to work, to contribute. I can cook and clean, manage a household, work in a garden. I need to feel useful. The ranch house is too big for me to manage alone. I would welcome the help, and I will pay you fair wages for your work." Tabitha blinked. "Pay me, but I would be your wife. And you should have your own money, your own security. I mean what I said about this being a partnership." He stepped closer, and she could see the sincerity in his eyes. "Are we agreed then?" "Yes," she whispered. "We are agreed." They rode out that morning, heading northeast toward Russell County. The journey took most of the day, the prairie stretching endlessly around them, golden grass waving in the summer breeze. Quinton drove the wagon, and Tabitha sat beside him, acutely aware of how little they knew about each other. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, needing to fill the silence with something other than her anxious thoughts. "I started it 5 years ago with money I saved working as a trail boss. Bought the land cheap because no one else wanted it. Too far from town, poor water access. Spent 2 years improving it, digging wells, building fences, the house and barn. Now I run about 200 head of cattle, some horses." He kept his eyes on the road as he spoke, his voice carrying a quiet pride. "It is not the biggest operation, but it is mine, built with my own hands and honest work. That must be satisfying, to look at something and know you created it." "It is. What about you? What did you want before all this happened?" The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her what she wanted in so long. "I wanted to be a teacher. Before my parents died, I was studying to take the teaching examination. But after the fever, there was no money for such things, and survival became more important than dreams. Why can you not teach now?" "No one would want a woman like me teaching their children. The scandal would never allow it." "Maybe not in Ellsworth," Quinton said, "but there are other places, other opportunities. And as my wife, with the protection that brings, who knows what might become possible." The thought was intoxicating, the possibility that her life might contain more than just survival and shame. Tabitha let herself imagine it for a moment before pushing the fantasy away. She needed to be realistic about what this marriage was and was not. They reached Russell just as the sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon. The town was larger than Ellsworth, busier, and Quinton seemed to know where he was going. He drove them directly to a small church on the edge of town. The minister, an elderly man named Reverend Hamilton, greeted them with warm curiosity. "Mr. Zeller, this is unexpected. What brings you to Russell?" "Reverend, this is Tabitha Walsh. We would like to be married today if possible." The Reverend's eyebrows rose. "This is rather sudden." "Are you certain? Marriage is a sacred commitment not to be entered into lightly." "We are certain," Quinton said firmly. He glanced at Tabitha. "Unless you have changed your mind." "No," she said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "I have not changed my mind." Reverend Hamilton studied them both for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. I will need witnesses. Let me fetch my wife and our neighbor." He paused at the door. "This is legal and binding, you understand. Before God and the law, you will be husband and wife." "We understand," Tabitha said. The ceremony was simple and quick, conducted in the small sanctuary with only the Reverend, his wife, and an elderly neighbor as witnesses. Tabitha spoke her vows in a clear voice, feeling the weight of each word. Quinton's voice was steady and sure, his hand warm when he slipped a simple gold band onto her finger. She wondered where he had gotten it, if he had carried it with him in hope, or if it had belonged to someone else. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Quinton kissed her cheek gently, a courteous brush of his lips that somehow felt more intimate than any touch she had experienced in her brief first marriage. They signed the register, made legal what had been spoken, and Reverend Hamilton handed them a certificate of marriage with a blessing and a smile. "May God grant you both joy and companionship," he said. "Marriage can be a great comfort if you approach it with kindness and patience." They spent the night at a modest hotel in Russell, in separate rooms as Quinton had promised. Tabitha lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling and trying to process the enormous change her life had taken in just 24 hours. She was married again, this time to a man she barely knew, a man who had asked nothing of her but partnership. It terrified her and gave her hope in equal measure. The next morning, they began the journey back to Ellsworth. As they drew closer to town, Tabitha felt her anxiety rising. The marriage would not stop the gossip, would likely make it worse, at least initially. But as Quinton had said, she would have protection now, a position that made her harder to threaten or intimidate. They stopped first at her small house to collect her belongings. It did not take long. She had little beyond her clothes, a few books that had belonged to her mother and some kitchen items. As she packed, Quinton wandered through the small rooms. "Thomas built this himself?" he asked. "Yes, he was proud of it, wanted to leave something lasting behind." Tabitha folded her morning dress carefully, wondering if she would need it again soon or if she could finally put it away. He was not a bad man, regardless of what people say. Just a lonely one who thought a wife might make his life better. Did it make his life better? I hope so, I tried. She closed the trunk that contained her worldly possessions. I was not in love with him and he knew it, but I respected him and tried to make him comfortable. Is that terrible? No, Quinton said quietly. It is honest. More honest than most marriages I have seen. He picked up the trunk easily, carrying it out to the wagon. Are you ready? As ready as I will ever be. They drove through town in the middle of the day when the streets were busiest. Tabitha sat straight-backed beside Quinton, her left hand visible so that anyone looking could see the gold band on her finger. The reactions were immediate. People stopped and stared. Whispers followed them like a wake behind a boat. Quinton stopped the wagon in front of the general store. "Wait here," he said, climbing down. He walked inside with a purpose that suggested this was planned, deliberate. Through the window, Tabitha could see him approach the counter where Mrs. Henderson stood with her husband. She could not hear the words, but she saw Quinton set something on the counter. Papers. After a moment, she realized it was their marriage certificate. Mr. Henderson picked it up, read it, showed it to his wife. Their faces registered shock, then something that might have been grudging acceptance. Quinton spoke, his posture relaxed but commanding, and both Hendersons nodded. When he emerged, several townspeople had gathered, drawn by curiosity. "Ladies and gentlemen," Quinton said, his voice carrying clearly, "I want to introduce you to my wife. We were married yesterday in Russell by Reverend Hamilton. Any questions or concerns about Mrs. Zeller should now be directed to me." The silence was absolute. Eleanor Pritchard stood among the gathered crowd, her face red with either anger or embarrassment. "You married her, after what she did. She did nothing except survive tragedy and face persecution with more grace than any of you deserved." Quinton's voice was hard now, brooking no argument. "My wife is a good woman who has been treated abominably by this town. That ends now." "You will regret this," Eleanor said, her voice shaking. "She will drain you dry just like she did poor Thomas. If I have regrets, they will be mine to bear, not yours to predict." Quinton climbed back onto the wagon and took up the reins. "Good day, Mrs. Pritchard. I hope you find better uses for your time than spreading malicious gossip." He drove them out of town, heading west toward his ranch, and Tabitha finally allowed herself to breathe. "You did not have to make such a public declaration." "Yes, I did. They needed to understand that you are under my protection now and that I will not tolerate any more harassment." He glanced at her, and his expression softened. "I know this is overwhelming, but you are safe now, Tabitha. I give you my word on that." The Triple Z Ranch appeared on the horizon about 30 minutes later, and Tabitha felt her breath catch at the sight of it. The house was larger than she expected, a solid 2-story structure built from strong timber and stone. Outbuildings dotted the property, including a massive barn, a bunkhouse for ranch hands, and several corrals where horses grazed peacefully. The land rolled gently toward distant bluffs, and she could see cattle scattered across the grasslands, dark spots against the golden prairie. "It is beautiful," she said honestly. "It is home," Quinton replied. "You're home now, too." He helped her down from the wagon and carried her trunk inside. The house was clean but clearly lacked a woman's touch. The furniture was sturdy and functional, arranged with more concern for practicality than aesthetics. The kitchen was well equipped but cluttered with the evidence of a man who cooked for necessity rather than enjoyment. "Your room is upstairs," Quinton said, leading the way. He opened a door to reveal a spacious bedroom with large windows overlooking the prairie. The bed was freshly made, and there was a wardrobe and dresser along one wall. "My room is at the other end of the hall. The middle room is empty, could be used for whatever you like. An office, sewing room, whatever suits you." "Thank you," Tabitha said. The room was easily twice the size of her bedroom in town, and the view was spectacular. "This is more than generous. It is just a room." He set her trunk down at the foot of the bed. "I will give you some time to settle in. Supper is usually around 6, nothing fancy but filling." After he left, Tabitha stood in the center of the room and slowly turned, taking it all in. This was her home now, her room in her home. The reality of it was still sinking in. She unpacked her belongings, hanging her dresses in the wardrobe and arranging her few personal items on the dresser. Her mother's books went on the windowsill where she could see them while she looked out at the prairie. When she went downstairs later, she found Quinton in the kitchen attempting to prepare supper. He had ingredients laid out, but his movements lacked confidence. "Let me," she said, stepping forward. "You said you wanted help managing the household. Let me start here." He looked relieved and stepped aside. "I will not argue with that. I can make food that is edible, but that is the best I can say about it." Tabitha assessed what he had available and began to work. There was venison, potatoes, onions, and various staples. Within an hour, she had prepared a meal that smelled substantially better than anything he admitted he could make. They ate at the kitchen table, the first meal they had shared as husband and wife, and the silence felt less awkward than she expected. "This is excellent," Quinton said after his first bite. "You have a gift. It is just cooking. My mother taught me. Tell me about them, your parents." So she did, speaking about her mother's gentle nature and her father's quick laugh, about the small house they had lived in and the plans they had made for her future. She talked about the fever that swept through their town, taking them both within a week of each other, leaving her alone at 21 with nothing but debts and grief. Quinton listened without interruption, his attention complete and genuine. When she finished, he shared his own story. He had grown up on a farm in Missouri, left home at 16 to work cattle drives, spent years learning the business before saving enough to start his own operation. His parents were still alive but distant, the relationship strained by his choice to leave. "You regret it?" Tabitha asked. "Leaving them? No, I was not meant for farming, for that kind of settled, predictable life. I needed something wilder, more challenging." He smiled slightly. "Though I suppose I have created my own settled life here, just on my own terms." They cleaned up together, falling into an easy rhythm that surprised them both. When the dishes were done and the kitchen set to rights, they moved to the front porch where the evening air was cooler. The sun was setting in a spectacular display of color, painting the sky in shades of orange, pink, and purple. "The sunsets are one of my favorite things about this place," Quinton said. "Everyone is different and everyone is beautiful." Tabitha had to agree. The vastness of the prairie, the endless sky, the sense of space and possibility, it all combined to create something almost transcendent. She felt some of the tension that had been coiled inside her for months begin to loosen. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. For defending me, for offering this arrangement, for giving me a way out. You do not need to keep thanking me. This benefits me too, remember? I have a partner now, someone to share the load, and for what it is worth, I think we might actually be friends." "I would like that," Tabitha said. And she realized she meant it. There was something steady and reassuring about Quinton, something that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt in a very long time. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. Tabitha rose early to prepare breakfast for Quinton and the 3 ranch hands he employed. She kept the house clean, tended a large vegetable garden, and began to introduce small touches that made the space feel more like a home. Curtains appeared in the windows, embroidered with simple patterns she worked on in the evenings. She rearranged the furniture to create more comfortable conversation areas. She organized the chaotic kitchen and established systems that made cooking easier. Quinton was gone most days, working the ranch from dawn until dusk. But he always came back for meals, and they would sit together and talk about their days. He told her about the challenges of ranching, about market prices and breeding stock and water rights. She told him about the garden, about improvements she wanted to make to the house, about books she was reading. Slowly, carefully, they were building something that resembled friendship. The townspeople remained hostile, but from a distance now. No one dared come to the ranch to harass her, and when she went into town with Quinton, people kept their nasty comments to themselves, though their disapproval was still evident in their cold stares. One morning, about a month after their marriage, Tabitha woke to find the house empty. Quinton had left a note saying he had gone to Salina to look at breeding stock and would be gone for 2 days. She was alone on the ranch with just the hands, who stayed in the bunkhouse and largely kept to themselves. She used the time to tackle a project she had been considering. The empty room between her bedroom and Quinton's had become a catch-all for things with no other home. She spent the day cleaning it out, scrubbing the floors and walls, and transforming it into a proper office. She moved a desk from the downstairs study, added a comfortable chair, and arranged books on a shelf she built from spare lumber she found in the barn. When Quinton returned 2 days later, dusty and tired from the road, she showed him what she had done. He stood in the doorway of the transformed room, his expression unreadable. "You did all this yourself?" "The hands helped me move the heavy furniture, but yes, mostly myself." She felt suddenly uncertain. "I hope you do not mind. I thought it might be useful to have a dedicated space for ranch business, for records and accounts." "Mind. Tabitha, this is incredible." He walked into the room, running his hand along the desk. "I have been keeping records in piles all over the house, never able to find what I need. This is exactly what this place needed." His approval warmed her more than she expected. "I am glad you like it." "Like it? I love it. You have a gift for seeing what a place needs and making it happen." He turned to her, and there was something in his eyes that made her heart skip. "You have made this house feel like a home in ways I never managed in 5 years of living here." That night at supper, Quinton seemed more animated than usual. "I bought 2 excellent bulls in Salina. Young, strong, good bloodlines. They will improve the herd substantially." He paused. "I also stopped by a school there. They are looking for a teacher for the winter term. The current teacher is expecting a baby and needs to leave her position." Tabitha's fork froze halfway to her mouth. "A school?" "I told them I knew someone who might be interested. Someone intelligent, educated, and passionate about teaching." He met her eyes. "You could apply if you want. It is far enough from Ellsworth that the gossip has not reached there, and as my wife you would have credibility." "You want me to teach? But what about the house, the ranch?" "We can hire someone to help with the house if we need to, or I can manage. You should not give up your dreams just because you married me, Tabitha. That was never part of our agreement." She set her fork down, her hands trembling slightly. "I do not know what to say." "Say you will think about it. The term does not start until October. You have time to decide." Tabitha did think about it. She thought about it constantly over the next few weeks. The idea of teaching, of using her mind and education for something meaningful, was intoxicating. But it also meant being away from the ranch, from Quinton, and she was surprised by how much that thought bothered her. When had she started looking forward to his presence? When had their evening conversations become the highlight of her day? When had the sight of him riding in from the range begun to make her heart beat faster? She was falling for him. The realization struck her one afternoon while she was working in the garden. She had been weeding around the tomato plants, and she looked up to see him walking toward the house, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his hat pushed back, laughing at something one of the hands had said. The sun caught in his dark hair, and the smile transformed his usually serious face, and she felt her breath catch with the beauty of him. Oh no. This was not part of the plan. This was dangerous. She threw herself into her work, trying to ignore the growing feelings, but they would not be ignored. Every kindness from him, every shared laugh, every moment of comfortable silence added to the weight of her emotion until she felt like she might burst with it. The problem was that she had no idea how he felt. He was unfailingly kind and respectful, but he had never indicated that he wanted their marriage to be anything more than the partnership he had originally proposed. He still slept in his room at the far end of the hall. He still treated her with a courtesy that suggested friendly distance rather than romantic interest. In late September, they went to town together for supplies. It was a Saturday, and the streets were busy with people conducting their weekly business. Tabitha had become accustomed to the cold stares and pointed whispers, had learned to hold her head high and ignore them. But today was different. As they walked toward the general store, a young woman stepped directly into their path. She was perhaps 19, pretty in a conventional way with blonde curls and a fashionable dress. Tabitha recognized her as Clarissa Pritchard, the mayor's daughter. "Mr. Zeller," Clarissa said, her voice saccharine sweet. "How lovely to see you, and your poor wife, of course." "Miss Pritchard," Quinton said, his tone cool and formal. "I wanted you to know that I hold no ill will about your marriage. I understand you felt obligated to rescue this woman from her situation. Such a noble Christian gesture." Clarissa's smile was poisonous. "But everyone knows it is not a real marriage. Why, people have seen you in town with her, and there is no affection between you at all. More like business partners than husband and wife. My marriage is none of your concern, Miss Pritchard. I am just saying that when you tire of playing knight-errant, there are women in this town who would be much more suitable partners. Women without scandalous pasts, women who could give you children and a proper place in society." Clarissa's eyes flicked to Tabitha with barely concealed contempt. "Everyone knows she is likely barren anyway. 2 years married to Thomas Walsh and no children. There must be something wrong with her." The words hit Tabitha like physical blows. She had never conceived during her marriage to Thomas, something she had assumed was due to his age and failing health. But what if Clarissa was right? What if there was something wrong with her? "Enough." Quinton's voice was hard as steel. "You have insulted my wife for the last time, Miss Pritchard. Here is what everyone should know. I am not playing at anything. Tabitha is my wife in every way that matters. I married her because I wanted to, because I saw in her qualities that are entirely absent in the so-called respectable women of this town. She is intelligent, kind, hardworking, and brave. She faces cruelty with dignity and responds to hate with grace." He stepped closer to Clarissa, and his voice dropped to a tone that carried nonetheless to the small crowd that had gathered. "As for children, that is between my wife and me, and I suggest you keep your nose out of our bedroom unless you want me to start discussing your various indiscretions." Clarissa's face went white, then red. "How dare you? How dare you speak to my wife that way?" Quinton took Tabitha's hand, intertwining his fingers with hers in a gesture of unmistakable unity. "Come, darling, we have better things to do than waste time with petty gossips." He led her away, his hand warm and firm around hers. Tabitha's mind was reeling from what had just happened, from his passionate defense, from the way he had called her darling with such easy affection. They completed their shopping in silence, both hyper-aware of the stares following them. When they loaded the supplies into the wagon and started the drive home, Tabitha finally found her voice. "You did not have to say those things." "Yes, I did. She had no right to speak to you that way, to make assumptions about our marriage or your worth. But some of what she said was true. We are more like partners than a typical married couple. You married me out of obligation, out of a desire to help, not because you wanted a wife in the traditional sense." Quinton was quiet for a long moment, his hands steady on the reins. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. "Is that what you think? That I married you purely out of obligation? You said yourself it was a marriage of convenience." "I said a lot of things that day, most of them designed to make you feel safe enough to accept my proposal." He pulled the wagon to a stop on the side of the road, miles from town, surrounded by nothing but prairie grass and sky. "Do you want to know the truth?" Tabitha's heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. Yes. I noticed you long before Thomas died. You would come into town, and I would watch you, fascinated by the way you carried yourself, the way you spoke. There was something about you that drew me, something real and genuine that I had not found in anyone else. He turned to face her fully. When Thomas died and the town turned on you, I was horrified. And when those men came to threaten you, I knew I had to do something. But it was not just about helping someone in need, Tabitha. It was about you specifically. It was always about you. But you offered me separate rooms, a business arrangement. Because I thought that was what you needed to feel safe. You had been through so much, had been married to a man you did not love out of necessity. I did not want to pressure you into anything, did not want you to feel trapped. His hand reached out, cupping her cheek with a gentleness that made her eyes sting with tears. But make no mistake, I wanted you then and I want you now. Not as a business partner or a housekeeper, but as a wife, as a partner in every sense of the word. Quinton, she whispered, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. I am in love with you, he said, the words simple and devastating. I have been falling in love with you every day since we married. Every meal we share, every conversation, every moment I see you making this ranch into a home. You are extraordinary, and I cannot believe I am lucky enough to be married to you. Tears were streaming down Tabitha's face now. I thought you did not want me. I thought you were just being kind. I want you so much it terrifies me. But I promised you this would be what you wanted it to be, and I meant that. If all you want is friendship and partnership, I will accept that. But if you want more... He trailed off, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that took her breath away. I want more, Tabitha said, her voice shaking. I am in love with you too. I have been trying so hard not to be, trying to protect myself, but I cannot help it. You are the best man I have ever known, and every day I wake up grateful that you chose me. The smile that spread across Quinton's face was like the sun breaking through clouds. Come here, he said softly. She moved closer on the wagon seat, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her against his chest. His heart was pounding as hard as hers. Then he tilted her face up and kissed her. Not the courteous brush of lips from their wedding, but a real kiss, deep and searching and filled with months of restrained longing. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Tabitha laughed through her tears. We are stopped in the middle of the road kissing like teenagers. I do not care. Let anyone who passes see that this is very much a real marriage. He kissed her again, softer this time, reverent. I love you, Tabitha. I will spend the rest of my life proving it to you. I love you too, she said, the words feeling like freedom. They drove the rest of the way home in a state of giddy happiness, hands linked on the seat between them. When they arrived at the ranch, Quinton lifted her down from the wagon, his hands lingering on her waist. The supplies can wait, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I want to talk, really talk, about everything. They went inside and ended up in the office she had created, sitting together on the small sofa she had placed by the window. They talked about their feelings, about when they started, about the fears and hesitations that had kept them from speaking sooner. They talked about the future, about what they wanted their marriage to be. I want you to apply for that teaching position, Quinton said, if it is what you want. We will figure out how to make it work. I want to teach, but not at the cost of our marriage, of building our life here. Then maybe we look for something closer, or maybe we wait until next year. We have time, Tabitha. We have the rest of our lives. That night, Quinton moved his belongings into Tabitha's room. She watched him hang his clothes in the wardrobe beside hers, overwhelmed by the intimacy of the moment. When he turned to her, she saw her own nervous anticipation reflected in his eyes. We can take this as slowly as you need, he said. There is no rush. But Tabitha had spent enough of her life being cautious and afraid. She stepped into his arms, rising on her toes to kiss him. "I am tired of waiting," she whispered against his lips. "I am tired of being afraid. I want to be your wife in every way." He made love to her with a tenderness and passion that left her breathless. It was nothing like her experiences with Thomas, which had been brief and perfunctory, duties performed without pleasure. Quinton took his time, learning what made her gasp and sigh, treating her body like something precious and worthy of worship. By the time they finally lay tangled together in the aftermath, Tabitha felt transformed, reborn into a life she had never imagined possible. "I did not know it could be like that," she admitted, her head resting on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Neither did I," he said honestly. "I have been with women before, but never someone I loved. That makes all the difference." The next morning they woke tangled together, and Tabitha felt a joy so complete it almost frightened her. They made love again in the soft morning light, taking their time, laughing and whispering and discovering each other in ways that felt both thrilling and safe. Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened in ways that went beyond the physical. They were true partners now, making decisions together about the ranch, about their future. Quinton taught her to ride properly, and she would sometimes accompany him when he checked the fences or moved cattle. She loved being out on the prairie with him, loved seeing him in his element, confident and capable. In October, a letter arrived from the school in Salina. They were still looking for a teacher and had heard from Quinton about Tabitha's qualifications. Would she be interested in interviewing Tabitha? And Quinton discussed it long into the night. In the end, she decided to interview, though she was leaning toward declining if offered the position. She had what she wanted right here. But the interview itself would be good practice, a way to test herself and see if teaching was truly still her dream. She traveled to Salina with Quinton, and the interview went better than she dared hope. The school board was impressed with her knowledge and her passion for education. They offered her the position on the spot. "I am honored," Tabitha said, "but I need to discuss it with my husband before I can give you an answer. May I have a few days to decide?" They granted her a week, and she and Quinton traveled home in thoughtful silence. "What do you want to do?" he asked as they lay in bed that night. "I think I want to wait," Tabitha said slowly. "Not give up on teaching forever, but wait until there is an opportunity closer to home. I do not want to be away from you, from the ranch. This is where I want to be. Are you certain? I do not want you to have regrets." "I am certain. My dreams have changed, Quinton. They include you now, include building a life here. Teaching can wait. We cannot." She wrote to the school board the next day, thanking them for the opportunity but respectfully declining. The letter she received back was understanding and included an invitation to apply again in the future if circumstances changed. As winter approached, Tabitha and Quinton settled into the rhythm of married life. The ranch work changed with the seasons, becoming more about maintenance and preparation than active herding. They spent long evenings by the fire, reading together, planning for the spring, simply enjoying each other's company. The town's attitude toward them had shifted subtly. The coldness remained, but it was now mixed with a grudging respect. Quinton and Tabitha presented such a united front, were so obviously devoted to each other, that the gossip had lost its power. People could say what they wanted, but the evidence of their genuine marriage was undeniable. In December, they hosted their first gathering at the ranch. It was not the townspeople they invited, but the ranch hands and their families, a few neighboring ranchers who had remained friendly, and Doc Brennan, who had quietly supported Tabitha through her ordeal. It was a modest Christmas celebration, but it was filled with laughter and warmth, and Tabitha felt tears prick her eyes as she looked around the crowded house and realized she had built this. They had built this together. Happy? Quinton asked, coming up behind her to wrap his arms around her waist. So happy, she said, leaning back against him. Happier than I ever thought possible. As winter gave way to spring, Tabitha began to suspect that her body was changing. She was tired more often, slightly nauseous in the mornings, and her monthly courses had not come. She said nothing at first, afraid to hope, afraid of the disappointment if she was wrong. But as the signs continued, she finally confided in Quinton. His reaction was pure joy. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her around the kitchen while she laughed and protested that he would make her sick. "We are having a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are having a baby." Doc Brennan confirmed it a week later. By his estimation, the baby would arrive in early October. They left his office walking on air, Tabitha's hand pressed protectively to her still flat stomach. "How are you feeling about this?" Quinton asked as they drove home. "Really feeling terrified," Tabitha admitted, "and thrilled. And grateful, so very grateful. We are going to be excellent parents. How can you be so sure?" "Because we love each other and we will love this child. That is the foundation for everything else." As her pregnancy progressed, Quinton became even more protective and attentive than before. He hired a woman from a neighboring ranch to help with the heavier housework, insisted that Tabitha rest more, fussed over her diet. She found it endearing and slightly exasperating in equal measure. "I am pregnant, not ill," she said one afternoon when he refused to let her lift a basket of laundry. "I know, but you are carrying our child and I want to make sure you have everything you need." She kissed him, touched by his devotion. "What I need is for you to stop worrying quite so much. I am strong and I am healthy." Doc says everything looks perfect, but she could not really be annoyed with him. The truth was that she loved how much he cared, loved the way his hand would rest on her growing belly as they lay in bed at night, loved the way he would talk to the baby, telling it stories about the ranch and the life they were building. In July, something happened that would have seemed impossible a year ago. Alina Pritchard appeared at their door, her face drawn and anxious. Tabitha answered the knock, her initial wariness melting into confusion when she saw who it was. "Mrs. Pritchard, this is unexpected. May I speak with you, please? I know I have no right to ask, but I need your help." Alina's voice was desperate, so different from her usual haughty tone. Quinton appeared behind Tabitha, his expression cautious. "What is this about?" "It is my daughter, Clarissa. She is pregnant, and the father has abandoned her. He was a traveling salesman who promised to marry her, and now he is gone, and she is terrified and ashamed." Alina's voice broke. "The town will treat her the way we treated you, worse even because she is unmarried. I cannot bear to see her suffer, and I realize now how cruel we were to you, how wrong. I am asking for your help, for your advice on how to survive this." Tabitha felt Quinton tense beside her, felt her own complicated emotions rising. This was the woman who had led the campaign of persecution against her, who had made her life miserable for months. But she was also a mother desperate to protect her daughter, and Tabitha understood desperation intimately. "Come in," Tabitha said quietly. They sat in the parlor, and Alina told them the full story. Clarissa had believed the salesman's promises, had given herself to him expecting marriage, and now found herself pregnant and abandoned. She was 4 months along, and it would soon be impossible to hide. "What do you want from us?" Quinton asked, his voice neutral. "I want to know how to protect her, how to help her keep her dignity when everyone turns on her. You managed it, Mrs. Zeller. You survived what we put you through and came out stronger." "How?" Tabitha looked at Alina, seeing the woman's fear and regret. "Revenge would be easy. She could turn her away, let the Pritchards face the consequences of their actions. But that was not who she wanted to be. "The first thing you do is stand by her," Tabitha said. "Publicly, loudly, without shame. Make it clear that she has your support and that you will not tolerate cruelty directed at her. The town took their cues from you in how they treated me. They will take their cues from you in how they treat Clarissa. What else? Help her find her strength. Let her work, contribute, be more than just her mistake. A woman with purpose is harder to break than one who sits idle and dwells on her shame." Tabitha paused. "And for what it is worth, I would not wish what happened to me on anyone, even someone who participated in making it happen. Tell Clarissa that if she needs a friend, someone who understands, she can come to me." Aliner's eyes filled with tears. "After everything I did to you, everything I said, you would help her." "Yes," Tabitha said simply, "because I remember how it felt to be alone and afraid. And because bitterness serves no one." After Aliner left, Quinton pulled Tabitha into his arms. "You are remarkable, you know that. I just know what it is like to need mercy. That is what makes you remarkable." Word of Tabitha's kindness to Clarissa spread through town. It did not erase all the damage that had been done, did not instantly transform the community, but it shifted something. People began to see Tabitha Zeller not as the Scarlet Woman they had painted her to be, but as a real person capable of grace and forgiveness. The coldness began to thaw slowly, incrementally. In September, Clarissa did come to visit. She was visibly pregnant now, and her usual confidence had been replaced by fear and uncertainty. Tabitha welcomed her with tea and kindness, and they talked for hours about pregnancy, about fear, about surviving scandal. "I am so sorry," Clarissa said eventually, "for the things I said to you, the way I treated you. I understand now how wrong it was." "I know," Tabitha said, "and I forgive you." In early October, just as the prairie grass turned golden and the air carried the first hints of autumn chill, Tabitha went into labor. It was a long, difficult process that stretched through the night and into the next day. Quinton stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, whispering encouragement. When their son finally entered the world with a lusty cry, Tabitha wept with relief and joy. Quinton cut the cord with shaking hands, his face wet with tears as he held his son for the first time. "He is perfect," Quinton said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are perfect. I love you so much." They named him Thomas, after Tabitha's first husband, a gesture that honored the past while embracing the future. The baby had Quinton's dark hair and Tabitha's green eyes, and he was healthy and strong despite the difficult delivery. Word of the birth spread, and to Tabitha's surprise, gifts began arriving. Baby clothes, blankets, toys, food for the new parents. Even some of the women who had been cruelest sent offerings, perhaps moved by the softening of Aliner Pritchard, perhaps simply touched by the universal joy of new life. The first time Tabitha ventured into town after the birth, holding baby Thomas in her arms with Quinton at her side, she braced herself for judgment. Instead, women stopped to admire the baby, to offer congratulations. It was not complete acceptance, not yet, but it was progress. As the weeks passed and they adjusted to life as parents, Tabitha and Quinton marveled at how much their lives had changed. The baby, who had once seemed like an impossibility, proof of her supposed barrenness, was now the center of their world. Thomas was a good baby, sleeping well and eating eagerly, and both parents found themselves besotted with every gurgle and expression. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Tabitha asked one night as they lay in bed, the baby asleep in the cradle beside them. "If you had not stood up for me that day, if you had not offered marriage—" "Every day," Quinton said. And every day I am grateful that I found the courage to act. You and Thomas are the best things that have ever happened to me. I love you, she said, the words as easy as breathing now. I love the life we have built. I love you too. And this is just the beginning, Tabitha. We have so much ahead of us. When Thomas was 6 months old, an opportunity arose that seemed almost too perfect. The schoolteacher in Ellsworth, Miss Hartwell, announced her retirement. She was 73 and had taught for over 50 years. The position needed to be filled, and to Tabitha's shock, several townspeople suggested she apply. "Are you sure?" she asked when the school board formally approached her. "After everything that happened, Mrs. Zeller, you have shown this town what grace and strength look like," said one of the board members, a man named Robert Foster who had always been neutral in the earlier controversies. "You have forgiven those who wronged you and extended kindness to those in need. Those are exactly the qualities we want in someone shaping our children's minds. And besides, everyone knows you are highly educated and passionate about learning. You would be an excellent teacher." Tabitha accepted, and in the fall of 1877 she began teaching at the Ellsworth School. Quinton adjusted his schedule to help with Thomas, and they hired a young woman to assist with the baby during school hours. It was challenging, balancing motherhood and teaching and marriage, but it was also deeply fulfilling. Her students adored her. She had a gift for making learning engaging, for seeing the potential in every child regardless of their background. Parents who had once shunned her now sought her advice about their children's education. She was becoming not just accepted but valued in the community. In the spring of 1878, Clarissa Pritchard gave birth to a daughter. She named her Grace, and Tabitha was honored to be asked to be the baby's godmother. It was a sign of how much had changed, how healing and forgiveness had transformed not just individual relationships, but the entire fabric of the community. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Tabitha taught during the school year and spent summers at the ranch, helping with the garden and caring for Thomas. Quinton's ranch continued to prosper, growing steadily through smart management and hard work. Their love deepened with each passing season, tested by the usual challenges of life but never breaking. In 1880, Tabitha gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Catherine after Tabitha's mother. She was a calm, observant baby who studied the world with serious eyes. Thomas, now nearly 3, was enchanted with his little sister, constantly wanting to help care for her. The house rang with laughter and life now. The loneliness that had once permeated its walls was completely gone, replaced by the beautiful chaos of family. Quinton would come in from working the ranch to find Tabitha reading to the children, or all 3 of them napping together in the parlor, and his heart would swell with gratitude for the life they had built. One evening in the summer of 1881, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset while the children played in the yard, Tabitha reflected on how far they had come. "You remember our wedding day?" she asked. "How uncertain everything was, how we were 2 strangers making a desperate arrangement." "I remember thinking I was the luckiest man alive to have convinced you to take a chance on me," Quinton said, "and I still think that every single day. I was so afraid of everything, of the town, of the future, of my feelings for you. What changed? You. You showed me that love does not have to be fearful or transactional. You showed me that I deserved kindness and respect. You gave me the courage to believe in happiness again." Quinton pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "You did the same for me. I was lonely without even fully realizing it, going through the motions of life without really living. You brought color and warmth and meaning to everything. You taught me what it means to truly love someone." Thomas came running up to the porch, his face flushed with excitement. "Daddy, come see." "I found a toad by the water trough." Quinton laughed and stood up. "Lead the way, son." Tabitha watched them walk off together, Thomas's small hand in his father's large one, and her heart was so full she thought it might burst. This life, this family, this love. It was everything she had never known she wanted and more than she had ever dreamed possible. As the years passed, they added 2 more children to their family, twin boys born in 1883 who were rambunctious and full of mischief from the moment they could crawl. The house was never quiet, never still, always filled with the sounds of life and love. Tabitha continued teaching, taking breaks when the babies were young but always returning to the classroom. She loved shaping young minds, loved being part of the community in a meaningful way. Quinton supported her completely, proud of his wife's intelligence and dedication. The ranch prospered beyond their initial hopes. Quinton's reputation for fair dealing and quality stock grew, and the Triple Z became one of the most respected operations in the region. He took on more hands, expanded his herds, and built additional outbuildings. The success was gratifying, but it was the family he came home to that gave his work meaning. Ellsworth itself changed over the years. The rough edges of the frontier town were slowly smoothed away as civilization took firmer root. The railroad brought more commerce and connection to the wider world. The town grew, and with growth came diversity and, slowly, more tolerance. Eleanor Pritchard became one of Tabitha's closest friends, a development that would have been impossible to imagine in those dark days of 1875. The 2 women worked together on various civic projects, and their children played together without any awareness of the troubled history between their families. It was proof that people could change, that communities could heal. On their 10th anniversary in 1885, Quinton took Tabitha back to Russell where they had married. They left the children with Eleanor for the weekend and spent 2 days simply being a couple, remembering where they had started and celebrating how far they had come. They stood in the same church where Reverend Hamilton had married them, now hand in hand, no longer strangers but partners who had weathered every storm together. "I would do it all again," Tabitha said. "Every hard moment, every fear, every tear. It was all worth it to get here to this life with you." "As would I," Quinton said. "Though I would spare you the pain if I could, you deserved better than what this town put you through. It made me stronger, made us stronger. And it taught me that true love is not about grand gestures or perfect circumstances. It is about choosing each other every day, about standing together when the world is against you, about building something beautiful out of broken pieces." They renewed their vows in that small church, just the 2 of them and Reverend Hamilton, who was now quite elderly but still sharp. He remembered them and was delighted to see how their unlikely marriage had flourished. "I married many couples in my years," he told them, "but few have filled my heart with as much joy as you 2. You are proof that love, real love, can overcome anything." As they drove back to Ellsworth, back to their children and their ranch and their life, Tabitha reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She thought about the frightened widow she had been, shamed by a town that should have offered comfort, and the woman she had become, confident and loved and valued. She thought about Quinton, the rancher who had loved her in front of them all when it would have been so much easier to stay silent, who had offered her not just protection but partnership and eventually a love deeper than she had imagined possible. "What are you thinking about?" Quinton asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "Everything, nothing, how grateful I am, how much I love you. I love you too, always." They spent the rest of the drive in comfortable silence, hands linked, hearts joined. 2 people who had found each other in the darkness and built a life filled with light. The years continued to unfold with their share of joys and challenges. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, celebrated births and mourned losses, watched their children grow and their ranch flourish. Through it all, they remained each other's constant, the foundation upon which everything else was built. Thomas, their eldest, grew into a thoughtful, kind young man with his father's strength and his mother's intelligence. He took to ranching naturally, and by the time he was 16, he was working alongside Quinton as a true partner. Catherine became a teacher like her mother, drawn to education and service. The twins, James and Joseph, were inseparable and full of energy, bringing laughter and occasional chaos wherever they went. As Tabitha watched her children grow, she sometimes thought about the town's accusations all those years ago, about being barren, about being cursed. She would look at her 4 healthy, happy children and feel nothing but gratitude for how wrong those cruel judgments had been. In 1890, when Thomas was 15, a young man came through Ellsworth asking about Tabitha. He was Thomas Walsh's great-nephew from St. Louis, and he carried letters that his grandfather, Thomas's cousin, had wanted to send years ago but had been too ashamed to mail. The letters were apologies. Thomas's cousin had written to explain that he had believed the gossip at first, but had later learned the truth from mutual acquaintances. He had wanted to reach out to help, but by the time he worked up the courage, he heard she had remarried and seemed to be thriving. He had not wanted to intrude on her new life, but wanted her to know that he had been wrong, that he was sorry. He had died the previous winter, and his grandson had found the unsent letters and decided to deliver them in person, feeling his grandfather would have wanted that. Tabitha read the letters with tears in her eyes, touched by the belated apology but no longer needing it. That chapter of her life had been closed for so long, the wounds healed over with time and love. "It is kind of him to bring these," she told the young man. "Please thank your family for thinking of me, and tell them I hold no grudges. I have been blessed beyond measure, and the past is truly past." After the young man left, Quinton found her in the garden where she often retreated when she needed to think. "Are you all right?" he asked, settling onto the bench beside her. "More than all right. I was just thinking about how strange life is, how the worst moments can lead to the best ones. If Thomas had not died, if the town had not turned on me, I would never have found you. I would never have this life. I am glad you have peace about it. I do. Finally, completely, that part of my life is done, and I am grateful for where it led me." She leaned against him, breathing in the familiar scent of him, sun and leather and home. "I love you, Quinton Zeller. Thank you for choosing me, for standing up for me, for loving me when I needed it most. Loving you was the easiest thing I have ever done," he said. "You made it easy by being exactly who you are." They sat together in the garden as the summer sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant colors. The sounds of their children playing drifted from the house, and somewhere in the distance, they could hear the hands bringing in the cattle for the night. This was their life, built on love and trust and the willingness to stand together against whatever came. It had not always been easy, but it had always been worth it. As the years rolled on toward the turn of the century, Tabitha and Quinton watched their children begin to build their own lives. Thomas married a rancher's daughter and started his own spread adjoining the Triple Z. Catherine met a lawyer from Hays City and married in a beautiful ceremony at the Ellsworth Church. The twins decided to attend university in Kansas City, determined to see something of the world beyond the prairie. Tabitha retired from teaching in 1895 at age 44, feeling she had given 20 years to the education of Ellsworth's children and was ready to focus on her family and the ranch. The town threw her a retirement celebration that brought tears to her eyes. Parents and former students spoke about the difference she had made in their lives, about the knowledge and confidence she had given them. "Mrs. Zeller taught me to read when everyone else had given up on me," one young man said, now grown and managing his own farm. "She saw potential in me that I did not see in myself. She changed my life." Story after story echoed the same theme. She had not just taught facts and figures. She had taught children to believe in themselves, to reach for more than what seemed possible. She had given them the same gift Quinton had given her, the courage to become more than circumstance suggested they could be. In the spring of 1900, as the new century dawned, Quinton and Tabitha celebrated their 25th anniversary. Their children arranged a large party at the ranch, inviting everyone who had been part of their lives over the past quarter century. The house and yard overflowed with people, food, laughter, and music. As Tabitha looked around at the gathering, she saw Eleanor Pritchard chatting with Doc Brennan. She saw Clarissa, now married with 3 children, helping to serve food. She saw neighbors who had once shunned her now embracing her children with genuine warmth. She saw the life she and Quinton had built, not just for themselves but for their entire community. "Happy?" Quinton asked, coming up behind her to wrap his arms around her waist as he had done so many times over the years. "So happy I almost cannot believe it is real. Sometimes I still expect to wake up and find this was all a dream. It is real. We made it real, together." He turned her to face him, and she saw the love in his eyes that had never dimmed, had only grown deeper with time. 25 years and you are still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen, still the strongest, the kindest, the most remarkable. You might be biased, absolutely. And I have earned the right to be." He kissed her then in front of everyone, a kiss that spoke of 25 years of love, partnership, and unwavering commitment. The crowd cheered, and Tabitha laughed against his lips, feeling like a young woman again, feeling the same flutter of joy she had felt the first time he had truly kissed her on that dusty road so many years ago. Their son Thomas stood up and called for everyone's attention. "I want to propose a toast to my parents. Growing up, I watched them build something extraordinary. Not just a successful ranch, not just a family, but a partnership built on respect and love. They showed me what a marriage should look like. They taught me that love is not just a feeling but a choice you make every single day." To Quinton and Tabitha Zeller, the best parents and the best example anyone could ask for. Everyone raised their glasses, and Tabitha felt tears streaming down her face. These were happy tears, grateful tears, the tears of a woman who had been given more than she ever dared hope for. As the party continued into the evening, as children played and adults talked and the band played music for dancing, Quinton pulled Tabitha away from the crowd. They walked to their favorite spot, a small hill overlooking the ranch where they often came to watch the sunset. From here, they could see everything they had built. The house, larger now after additions to accommodate their growing family. The barns and outbuildings, well-maintained and prosperous. The cattle grazing peacefully in the distance. The garden Tabitha had expanded over the years. The lives they had created spreading out before them in tangible, undeniable reality. "We did good," Quinton said softly. "Did we not?" "We did better than good. We did remarkably." Tabitha leaned into him, his arm coming around her shoulders in a gesture so familiar it felt like breathing. "Thank you for saving me. You saved yourself. I just gave you a safe place to land. You gave me everything. A home, a family, love, purpose. You gave me back myself." They stood together as the sun set on another day, on another year, on a life built from love and courage. The prairie stretched endlessly around them, and the sky blazed with color, and their family celebrated below. This was their legacy, Not just the land or the buildings or the wealth, but the love they had nurtured and the life they had built together against all odds. In the years that followed, as they moved into their 50s and then their 60s, they became the elder statesmen of Ellsworth. Quinton was frequently consulted on ranching matters and land disputes. Tabitha mentored young teachers and worked on civic improvement projects. Together, they were pillars of the community, respected and loved by all who knew them. They welcomed grandchildren, delighting in the next generation and passing on the wisdom they had gained. They took trips to see the twins in Kansas City, marveling at the rapidly changing world while grateful for the constancy of their own love. They never forgot where they started, never took for granted the miracle of their partnership. On their 40th anniversary in 1915, they returned once more to Russell, older now but no less devoted. 40 years, Tabitha said, standing in front of the church where they had married. How is that possible? Because we loved each other enough to work at it every day, because we never gave up, even when things were hard. Quinton took her hand, their fingers intertwining as naturally as they had for 4 decades, because we were meant to be together. I truly believe that. So do I. Out of all the terrible things that happened, all the pain and shame and fear, came the greatest gift of my life. You. Us. They stood together as the sun set over the Kansas prairie one more time, 2 people who had defied expectation and judgment to build something beautiful. The widow who had been shamed by the town and the rancher who had loved her in front of them all, proving that true love could overcome anything, that courage and kindness could transform not just individual lives but entire communities. Their story was not one of perfection but of persistence, not of ease but of endurance, not of luck but of love, chosen and nurtured and protected through all the seasons of life. It was a story of 2 people who found each other in the darkness and created light together, a light that illuminated not just their own path, but the paths of everyone they touched. And as they drove home to Ellsworth one last time, home to the ranch they had built and the family they had raised and the life they had created together, they knew with absolute certainty that every struggle had been worth it. Every tear earned them this joy. Every moment of doubt led them to this unshakable faith in each other. Their love story, born in shame and defended with courage, had become a testament to the power of standing together, of choosing love over fear, of believing in second chances and the possibility of redemption. It was a story they would carry with them for the rest of their days, a story that would live on in their children and grandchildren, a legacy of love that would outlast them both. Together, they had proven that the opinion of a town mattered less than the truth between 2 hearts, that public shame could be overcome by private devotion, and that the greatest love stories are not those that start perfectly, but those that persevere through imperfection, to find something real and lasting and true. In the end, that was their triumph, simple and profound. A widow and a rancher who defied judgment to find joy, who chose each other when the world said they should not, and who built a life so full of love that it transformed not just themselves but everyone around them. Their story was proof that courage and kindness can change the world, one heart at a time, and that love, when given freely and defended fiercely, is the most powerful force in existence.